The folder arrived by courier on a Tuesday morning, slid across the breakfast table by a woman who had never once offered to pour anyone else's coffee. Lorraine Whitfield set it down with the particular care of someone who had rehearsed the gesture, not slamming it, not placing it gently, something in between, the controlled drop of a person who wanted to appear measured while making absolutely certain the weight of the moment was felt. Her son Owen sat at the far end of the table. He didn't look up from his phone. His wife Nadia Mensa looked the folder. Then at Lorraine. Then back at the folder. She picked it up and opened it without a word. Nadia had known this was coming. Not the folder specifically. Not the cream-colored cardstock with the Whitfield family crest embossed in the upper left corner. Not the tabbed legal section separated by color-coded dividers. But something like it. Some version of this moment. She had known it was only a matter of time. The Whitfields were a certain kind of family. Old money from the Ottawa Valley. The kind that had been diluted and leveraged and restructured so many times over 3 generations that what remained was mostly the story of money, rather than money itself. They lived in a house in Rockcliffe Park that required a full-time groundskeeper and seasonal maintenance on the stone fencing alone. They kept a cottage in the Muskokas that nobody used after August. They spoke about the family name the way other people spoke about religion, with conviction, with reverence, and with a faint anxiety that it might not actually hold. Owen Whitfield had grown up understanding that the name was the asset. That reputation was currency. That who you were seen with, photographed with, associated with. These were financial decisions as much as personal ones. Nadia had not grown up understanding any of this. She had grown up in Brampton, the second of 4 children, in a house where her mother worked nights at a logistics company, and her father ran a small accounting firm out of the basement. She had gone to the University of Toronto on a partial scholarship and a part-time job at a copy shop. She had graduated top of her program. She had gone directly into a position at one of the largest commercial real estate investment trusts in the country. She had been promoted twice in 3 years. She had met Owen at a charity gala she attended with a colleague. He had been charming. He had been handsome in a way that required maintenance. He had laughed at things she actually found funny, which was rarer than people admitted. She had married him 14 months later at a small ceremony in the Gatineau Hills that Lorraine Whitfield had described, once, in a voice just loud enough to carry, as intimate. The word had meant, not what we would have chosen. Nadia had filed that away and said nothing. She had been filing things away and saying nothing for 3 years. The document in the folder was a postnuptial agreement. The language was dense, but the intent was simple. Owen's assets, his stake in the Whitfield family holdings, his interest in the Rockcliffe property, his name on the Muskoka cottage, were to remain separate property in the event of a dissolution of the marriage. Nadia would be entitled to nothing she had not brought into the union. There was a cover letter. It was signed by Lorraine. Owen has worked his entire life to protect what this family built. We are simply formalizing what has always been understood. Nadia read it twice. She set the folder down on the table with the same careful lack of drama with which it had been delivered. She looked at Owen, who had put his phone face down now and was watching her with the expression of a man waiting for a verdict he suspected was coming but hoped he might avoid. "Did you know about this?" she asked. "Mom thought it would be a good idea to. Did you know about this?" A pause. "She mentioned it," Owen said, "a few weeks ago, and you didn't said nothing." Nadia nodded slowly, the way she did when she was calculating something. Not angry, not yet, or at least not visibly. Just very, very still. "I'll have my lawyer look at it," she said. Lorraine, who had remained standing near the kitchen counter with her hands folded, made a small sound. "Of course, take whatever time you need." The of course meant, "This is already decided." The whatever time you need meant, "Don't take long." Nadia recognized both of these. She smiled the way she had learned to smile in boardrooms, warmly, without giving anything away, and excused herself from the table. Her lawyer's name was Priscilla Armand. They had met 6 years earlier when Nadia was structuring her first solo acquisition, a mixed-use development in Etobicoke that everyone in her office had quietly bet she would fail to close. She had not failed to close it. Priscilla had been the one who found the encumbrance on title that would have unraveled the whole deal in due diligence. They had been working together ever since. Nadia emailed her from the car. "I need an hour. Can we do tomorrow morning?" Priscilla replied in 4 minutes. "Already blocked. Bring coffee." That night, Nadia lay awake in the bedroom she shared with Owen and listened to him breathe. He fell asleep easily. He always had. She had once thought this was a quality to admire, a kind of ease with himself, a stillness. She had since recategorized it. It was not ease. It was the particular unconsciousness of someone who had never had to lie awake calculating consequences. Because consequences had always been managed by someone else. His mother, mostly. She thought about the folder. She thought about the cover letter. What has always been understood. She thought about what Lorraine understood, and what Lorraine did not. Eventually she slept. Priscilla's office was in a converted Victorian in Cabottown, which suited her completely. Precise exterior, complicated interior, older than it looked. She had the documents spread across her desk when Nadia arrived, a cup of black coffee already waiting. "Walk me through it," Nadia said. "Standard postnuptial structure. Drafted to protect the Whitfield assets in dissolution. There are 3 main schedules." Priscilla tapped each tab in sequence. Schedule A is the Rockcliffe property. Schedule B is the Muskoka cottage. Schedule C is Owen's interest in Whitfield Holdings. That's the family company, incorporated federally, holding company structure with a numbered Ontario subsidiary. "What's the company worth?" Priscilla looked at her over the rim of her glasses. "On paper, about $4 million. Mostly the Rockcliffe property, which they've carried at assessed value for years. The holding company itself is," she paused, choosing the word carefully, "complicated." "Complicated how?" "There's a line of credit against the property, significant. I pulled what I could from the public registry this morning." She slid a page across the desk. "They've been drawing on it for at least 8 years. The most recent renewal was 18 months ago." Nadia looked at the number. She set the page back down. "They're leveraged," she said. "Heavily. The Rockcliffe house is worth approximately $3.2 million at current market. The credit facility against it is $2.4. So what they're actually protecting is about $800,000 in net equity, shared across 3 family members if you count Owen's brother, which the company structure suggests you should." Nadia was quiet for a long moment. "They don't know," Priscilla said. "Not a question." "They don't know what I know," Nadia said, "or what I have." Priscilla waited. "Before I married Owen," Nadia said, "I spent about 4 months doing what I would do with any asset I was considering acquiring. I looked at everything. Land titles, corporate registries, liens, the full picture, and the credit facility on the Rockcliffe property. The primary lender isn't a bank. A beat. It's a private credit vehicle," Nadia said, "structured through a trust." "Another beat. A trust that I control." Priscilla set down her pen. She picked it up again. "Say that again," she said. 3 years earlier, 6 weeks before the wedding, Nadia had been sitting in this same office running numbers. She had run 20 times already. She had done her research on the Whitfields not because she was suspicious of Owen. She was not suspicious of Owen, not then, but because she was the kind of person who researched everything. It was not distrust. It was method. The Whitfield family's primary lender had been, at that time, a private investment firm run by a man named Douglas Hext, Hext Capital. Small operation, relationship-based. The kind of firm that did quiet deals for families who didn't want their credit needs visible in the chartered bank system. Nadia had encountered Hext Capital once before, tangentially, on a refinancing she'd worked on in her 2nd year at the trust. Douglas Hext had been looking to exit the credit book for some time. He was 71, in declining health, no succession plan. The Whitfield facility was one of 6 performing loans remaining in the portfolio. The whole book was available for the right price. Nadia had bought it. Not personally. Through a holding structure she'd built over 2 years of careful savings and one very well-timed disposition. The purchase had been quiet, properly documented, and entirely legal. The Whitfields had been notified, as required, that their credit facility had been transferred to a new lender. The letter had gone to their accountant. Their accountant had filed it. Nobody had read it closely enough to understand what it meant. The new lender was a numbered company. The numbered company was owned by a trust. The trust's beneficiary was Nadia. She had not planned to use this. She had simply known that it was there. There was a difference between holding information as insurance and intending to deploy it as a weapon. Nadia had understood the difference clearly. She had hoped it would remain in the first category. The folder had reclassified it. "You could sign the postnup," Priscilla said. They had been talking for 2 hours. The coffee cups were empty. "On its face, you'd be giving up any claim to the Whitfield assets. But if you call the loan..." "I'm not going to call the loan." Priscilla waited. "Not yet," Nadia said. "And maybe not at all. That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Nadia looked out the window at the street below. A woman was walking a dog. A man was unlocking a bicycle. Ordinary Tuesday morning, ordinary city, ordinary life. "The point," she said, "is that Lorraine Whitfield handed me a document designed to tell me what I don't own. She sat across the table from me and she explained, in very careful legal language, that I am not an equal in this family, that I never was, that the name and the house and the history belong to them, and I am adjacent to it at best. And you want to." "I want her to understand," Nadia said, "what she actually handed me." She signed the post-nuptial agreement on a Thursday afternoon, in the presence of her lawyer and Owen's family solicitor, a nervous man named Jeffrey who kept touching his collar. She signed each page clearly and without comment. She initialed the schedules. She thanked Jeffrey for his time. On the drive home, Owen reached across the console and put his hand on hers. "I know that wasn't easy," he said. She let his hand stay where it was. "It wasn't hard either," she said. He took this as reassurance. She did not correct him. The dinner was Lorraine's idea. A celebration, she called it, though she was careful to use more neutral language. A family dinner now that things are settled. She made a reservation at a restaurant in the Glebe that the family had been going to for 30 years, a place with dark wood paneling and a wine list the size of a small novel. Nadia wore a dress she had bought 2 years ago and never found an occasion for navy blue. Very simple, very good fabric. Owen's brother Stuart was there with his wife Annalise. Stuart was 4 years older than Owen, heavier, louder, with the particular bluster of a man who was used to being the impressive one in the room and had begun to sense, recently, that this was no longer guaranteed. Annalise was quiet and careful and watched everything with the eyes of someone who had been watching this family far longer than Nadia had. They ordered. They talked about the cottage. They talked about a fundraising event at the National Arts Center that Lorraine was chairing. Stuart made a joke about the real estate market that was really a comment directed at Nadia, at her profession, at the particular kind of money she represented, earned rather than inherited, recent rather than established. Nadia smiled. Lorraine raised her glass. To the family, she said. To what endures. Everyone drank. Nadia set her glass down and said quietly, to no one in particular and to everyone precisely. I've been thinking about the credit facility on the Rockcliffe property. The table shifted. Not physically, but something in the air of it. Stuart looked at his mother. Owen looked at Nadia. Lorraine's expression did not change, but her hand, holding the stem of her wine glass, went very still. It's due for its 5-year renewal in March, Nadia said. I just wanted to make sure everyone was thinking about it. The facility is handled by our accountant, Lorraine said. Her voice was even. It renews automatically. It did renew automatically, Nadia said, under the previous terms. But the lender changed about 3 years ago. The new terms will need to be negotiated. It's worth being prepared. A silence. Who's the new lender? Stuart asked. Nadia picked up her wine glass. She took a small sip. She set it back down. Me, she said. She had not wanted to say it like that, or perhaps she had. She had rehearsed several versions of this conversation over the past 3 weeks, ranging from a formal letter through her lawyer to something not unlike this. A dinner table, a raised glass, a sentence delivered without drama into a room full of people who had decided, long ago, that she was not worth considering carefully. The version she had chosen was this one. Lorraine put her glass down. That's not possible, she said. I have the documentation if you'd like to review it, Nadia said. The transfer of the credit facility was registered properly. Your accountant received the notification. I can have Priscilla send over the full package tomorrow if it's helpful. You're saying you own our debt, Stuart said. I'm saying I hold the credit facility secured against the Rockcliffe property. That's correct. Owen had not spoken. He was looking at her the way he had looked at her the morning of the folder, waiting for the verdict, hoping to be spared. This is why you signed the agreement, Lorraine said. Not a question. A realization arriving in real time, which was, Nadia had to admit, a more dignified response than she had expected. I signed the agreement because it was the right thing to do given what it covered, Nadia said. I signed it without reservation because I didn't need what it was trying to keep from me. You set us up, Stuart said. I did my homework, Nadia said. I did it before the wedding. I've been doing it my whole life. It's how I got to where I am. She paused. Where am I, by the way? I've always been curious how the family would describe it. Nobody answered that. She did not call the loan. She had said she wouldn't, and she kept her word. That was important to her, not because of them, but because of herself. The kind of person she was not determined by the kind of people they were. That line had to hold. What she did do was schedule a meeting with their accountant, a measured man named Carl, and explain the renewal terms that would be available in March. The interest rate would be higher than the previous facility. Not punishingly so, but meaningfully. The terms would be shorter. There would be a formal appraisal requirement and a proper review of the underlying financials. Carl listened carefully. He thanked her for the advance notice. He said he would need to advise his clients. Of course, Nadia said. Take whatever time you need. She heard herself say it. She noted the echo. She did not smile until she was back in her car. Owen asked her that night why she hadn't told him. They were sitting in the kitchen, the house quiet around them, the particular silence of a marriage in the middle of its reckoning. When, she asked. Before the wedding. When you found out about the loan, would it have changed anything? He thought about this for a long time. She gave him the time. She had learned in 3 years of marriage that he needed it. Not because he was slow, but because he had been raised in a family where thinking carefully was less valued than answering confidently, and he was still unlearning the habit. I don't know, he said finally. I don't know either, she said. That's why I didn't tell you. It was honest. She had held the information because she didn't yet know what it meant for them. Whether it was a foundation or a liability. Whether it made her stronger in the marriage or just more complicated. She had watched and waited and tried to understand the way she always did. The folder on the breakfast table had answered the question she'd been waiting to have answered. I didn't want this, Owen said. The postnup, that was her idea. I know, I should have told you when she first mentioned it. You should have, Nadia said. That's true. He looked at his hands. What happens now? She considered the question. What happens now is up to you, she said, not your mother's, not Stuart, not the name or the house or any of it, you. He looked up. I'm not interested in the estate, she said. I never was. I'm interested in whether you're the person I thought I married, or whether that was a version of you that only exists when things are easy. That's not fair. It's entirely fair, she said without heat. It's the question. You can take your time with it. Lorraine called once, 2 weeks later. The conversation was brief. She said she had spoken with her financial advisor. She said she understood the situation. She did not apologize, but there was something in her voice that was adjacent to it. A careful contraction of the usual certainty. A sentence left unfinished that in another woman might have been an admission. Nadia thanked her for calling. She said the renewal terms were open for discussion. She said she had no interest in making things difficult and every interest in a fair arrangement. You could have told me, Lorraine said. Before. You didn't ask, Nadia said. You assumed. A long pause. I suppose we did, Lorraine said. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement that Nadia expected she would ever receive, and she found to her own mild surprise that it was enough. She was not looking for a transformation. She was not holding out for a changed woman or a late apology or a relationship that would suddenly become something it had never been. She was simply looking for the truth to be on the table, where it could be seen by everyone in the same plain light. Owen moved out for 6 weeks that spring. He stayed with a friend in Centertown, came back on weekends and then eventually came back fully, with a quietness that was different from his usual quietness, less insulated, more present. He told his mother at Easter dinner that certain decisions in their marriage would be made between him and Nadia and not brought to the family table. Lorraine had said nothing, which, from Lorraine's, was considerable. He was not a changed man. He was the same man with a harder understanding of what he had been willing to let happen. Whether that was enough was a question Nadia returned to, periodically, without resolution. Some questions didn't resolve. Some were just lived with, carefully, one choice at a time. The credit facility renewed in March on the new terms. Carl handled it efficiently. The Whitfields paid the higher rate without comment. The Rockcliffe house stayed in the family. Nobody made a speech about it. Nobody sent a letter. At some point during that same month, on a Saturday morning, Lorraine stopped by the house unannounced. Owen was out running. Nadia answered the door in her work clothes. Having spent the morning on a call with the development team in Calgary, Lorraine stood on the step with a container of shortbread she had clearly made herself. She held it out. I was baking, she said. It was not an explanation. It was the only sentence available to her. Nadia took the container. Come in, she said. I'll make tea. Lorraine stepped inside. She looked around the front hallway. The framed print Nadia had brought from her apartment, the row of shoes by the door, the particular orderly warmth of a home arranged by someone who had learned, early, that a home was built rather than inherited. She didn't say anything about it. They had tea in the kitchen without ceremony. They talked about the weather, which had been gray for 2 weeks. They talked about the Calgary project briefly because Lorraine asked. They did not talk about the folder or the dinner or the loan or any of the things that existed between them as sediment, accumulated over 3 years, that would take much longer than one Saturday morning to move. But they stayed at the table for an hour, and when Lorraine left, she said goodbye to Nadia by name. Not dear, not you, not the small erasures that had been the texture of their relationship from the beginning. Just her name. It was a small thing, it was not nothing. Nadia washed the 2 cups and set them on the rack to dry and went back to her desk and got back to work.